As strikes continue to target the Iranian capital, US President Donald Trump has this Friday demanded Iran's unconditional surrender as the only acceptable way of ending hostilities. Writing on his Truth Social platform, he also promised to help rebuild the country's economy if Tehran complied and installed new leadership. Well, for more, I'm joined in the studio now by our international affairs commentator, Doug Herbert. Hi, Doug. Trump, as I just said, now calling for Iran's unconditional surrender. He posted that on his Truth Social account about an hour ago. Tomorrow, we're going to be a full week into this conflict. Fair to say it doesn't look like Iran is about to surrender unconditionally.
And neither is Donald Trump giving any indication that he's looking for an exit strategy, a so-called off-ramp, any sort of diplomacy to perhaps bring a sooner rather than a later end to this conflict. We essentially have laid out an unprovoked war of Donald Trump's choice, which many of those who had been involved in around the negotiations on the eve of this attack say that there was no real imminent threat posed by Iran, and that this war now has taken on sort of an inevitability and a momentum, almost like a juggernaut-like momentum of its own, with more and more tentacles growing by the day, with all the uncertainty that accompanies those extra tentacles, because you just don't know what's next and what sort of offshoot you're going to see sprouting up all of a sudden. You know, The Economist came out today with its weekly edition. It says a war without strategy. And that essentially, for many people watching this war, both within Iran, around the region, but also here in Europe, that sort of sums up this sense of a war that was launched unilaterally, or U.S.-Israeli is sort of a tag team effort, if you will, with no clear objective spelled out. We have, as of this, day 7, essentially, on the eve of what will be one full week of this war tomorrow. You have Israel intensifying its attacks and its targeting of Iran alongside the United States. The latest attacks, on the bunker of the slain late Supreme Leader Khamenei. You have Israel and Hezbollah continuing to exchange ferocious volleys of fighting, with no signs of that subsiding in the very near offing, amid pleas in some quarters for Israel not to extend its war further into Lebanon, for Hezbollah also to lay down its arms, for Iran not to drag Lebanon and its innocent civilians, its citizens who've already borne the brunt of so much misery in the past months and years, not to drag Lebanon into the war. All of that's happening. And lo and behold, just a few minutes before I came on into the studio here, the Washington Post in the United States is reporting that, citing sources within the Trump administration, saying that Russia is supplying Iran with intel, i.e. targeting information, to help locate American aircraft and warships in the Gulf region. So talking about another potential, giant aspect, anticipated or unanticipated, potentially bringing in, a clear, explicit U.S. adversary at this moment, not just in the war in Ukraine, but on a number of geopolitical fronts into this war. We talk about now, I think, 14 countries and counting have had some sort of been targeted in some way, shape, or form, some sort of incident. So the periphery of countries seems to be expanding outwards beyond the immediate Gulf region. So when you talk of the uncertainty, you talk about the things that could potentially go wrong. They seem at odds with a narrative where the U.S. administration, while not pinning a time frame on this, seem to project that they have this under control. We've heard the military briefings in the past few days, a couple of them in which the message has been, they've projected a message of these are swift and a precise military operations by the mightiest two military forces in the world, including the mightiest one of all, the U.S., overwhelming force being brought to bear. They will not be able to hold out, they being the adversary, Iran, for long. Conflicting reports, how many munitions do they have? We don't know. Donald Trump at one point claiming that the U.S. can keep waging this on and on endlessly if he wanted to, that the U.S. stockpile is greater and better than it's ever been. But then you have other military observers questioning that, saying, is that actually the case? Are there enough munitions? We simply don't know what the current state of Pentagon stockpiles, but by some accounts, they do run the risk in certain areas of running low, even if that's not the narrative and the official line coming out of the Pentagon. So basically, wherever you turn, wherever I open my mouth right now, and whatever comes out of it seems to be something that raises more questions than it answers, because that is exactly where we are on the eve of the first full week of this war. We do not know where it's going. We do see more and more countries being drawn in willy-nilly into this conflict. And here in Europe, you have a sense of a Europe, if not divided, a Europe also being drawn, in a sense, kicking and screaming into a conflict that it never asked for.
So, Doug, more and more countries, more entities being drawn into this conflict. Fair to say that nerves are being jangled across the board, everyone from oil traders to Gulf allies. It really is extraordinarily large, the scope of this conflict.
It is so large that, one of the early headlines today, you don't know where to look first, right? When you wake up in the morning and check what happened while you were sleeping. One of the headlines that, the U.S. administration, the Trump administration has waived given India a waiver to purchase Russian oil. Because there had been, remember, that sanction, the U.S. told India, you do not purchase Russian oil. Unclear how much India had actually obeyed that commandment from the Trump administration. But now that has been waived. It's a cognizance of the reverberations well beyond the immediate region. The oil market's obviously really shaken, and not just the crude oil. We're talking about the LNG, liquefied natural gas. We're talking about LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. We also have all sorts of, gas that's delivered in canisters, not just through pipelines, which are being affected because a lot of that is shipping trade through which it is delivered and not through pipeline trade. We have oil markets. Oil now is touching around $90, the benchmark crude oil price, $90 a barrel. It is up about 24% in a little less than a week, right? Since the start of this conflict last Saturday, 24% for oil in 1 week, where some people are likening it to the types of oil shocks from 1979, from the late 70s, during the Arab oil embargoes, all of that. We might not be there yet, but there are definitely signs that if this continues on at this tempo, at this cadence, we could be there very soon. We've had several countries saying that they were halting their oil production in the region over security concerns and security risks. So it's not just oil markets being rattled. And amid it all, we have talk that some of the Gulf countries, some of the Gulf allies are considering uncorroborated reports, ways that they could perhaps respond. That is bringing in this aspect of a potential offensive operation. We're not there. It's not happening yet, but the very fact that it's already talked, when you start talking about it, things that you're talking about today, all of a sudden are normalized and become the reality tomorrow. And that is the slippery slope of this conflict on the eve of its first full week.